Welcome, Meteor fans, to the May edition of the Meteor Club question and answer. This is a show where I invite guests on and we take all kinds of live questions about Meteor and try to answer them as best we can. And my guest today is Brad Vogel from Mixmax. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hey.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Mixmax and about yourself, too?
Sure, yeah. I'll give you a little background here. So my name is Brad Vogel, and I'm a co-founder and CTO of Mixmax. So Mixmax is a Chrome extension that adds a ton of features to your Gmail. Features such as polls, email tracking, way to set up meetings, bunch of things. What's interesting about Mixmax, though, is that it's way more than a Chrome extension. It's architecturally actually an email client because it can be used standalone and completely independent.
Oh, Brad. Hey.
Hi.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Mixmax and you have the
about
yourself too?
Sure, yeah. Background here. So my name is Brad Vogel, and I'm a co-founder and CTO of Mixmax. The Chrome. Hey, Josh, I think I had a connection problem. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let me pick up where I left off there.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Mixmax is architecturally an email client that can actually be used as a standalone email app, really. We say one half of an email client because we do the composing half. That's how we implement all the interactive features within email. And then the Chrome extension piece is just really our way to shoehorn that client into your Gmail experience by placing an iframe inside of Gmail that is used in place for your typical Gmail compose window. And we also have an SDK, so developers like you all can build apps on top of email. And an app is basically a widget inside of your email that can represent a workflow, such as scheduling a meeting, a poll, something like that.
Nice.
Usage-wise, we're a pretty big app. We have about 8,000 downloads on the Chrome store. Handle about 1,500 concurrent users, people that are using it inside of Gmail at the same time. A little bit about my background before Mixmax. So I've been doing web development for about 7 years now. And my background before that's actually in operating systems. When I graduated school, I went to work for Apple on the OS X team.
Oh, wow.
Worked on early OS X releases, and then switched over on WebOS at Palm smartphone. And WebOS was just fascinating. It was an entire operating system built out of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's where I really learned web development inside now. Then after that, I joined a company called Inkling working on ebook software, where I met my two co-founders, Sean Perry-Rith and Olaf Mate. And we started Mixmax about a year ago.
Awesome. That's a pretty awesome story there. I don't think I've ever met anyone that's worked on OS X. So
yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I think you actually covered. Like, I was going to ask you about the like what your user base looks like, and you covered that. So that's awesome. So I think you guys actually you talked to MDG and like maybe in like 104. That release, the backlog or the oplog backlog pressure switch came out, right?
Yep.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Like what happened there and like why they came out with that?
Sure, yeah. So so I wrote a blog post on it, which you should check out at mixmax.com/blog. So I mentioned that Mixmax is architecturally an email client. So we have to take over the to field in email, which means that we have to sync all your contacts. So autocomplete type down search works when sending an email. So in order to do that, of course, we have a Mongo collection where we store all the contacts. And our first implementation was to just use a Meteor subscription and to sync all the contacts as you typed and to create a new publication with the search term. So it would just sync in all the contacts. Biggest problem with that was that it was a very noisy collection in Mongo that was watched by Meteor. So what would happen would be if someone new signed up, and let's say they had 10,000 contacts in their Google Contacts, we would write 10,000 documents to the Mongo collection, which means that Meteor would sit there and spin for about 30 seconds, and it would spin on all the servers that we deployed on. So it did not scale horizontally by design, right? Because every server has to consume the same op log.
Yeah.
So the quick fix, we thought, would be to just stop using a publication, just publish once, so we're not actually watching that collection. What happened there, though, was that Meteor was still consuming the op log, just, of course, to find out that it didn't care about any of the records that were being added to the op log. And that caused the CPU to spin 100% for about 7 seconds or so, but just long enough to stall the complete system and log users out. So the eventual solution was to just move contacts into their own database that was not watched by Meteor at all, and to just use Ajax on the front end to query contacts.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So yeah, that was maybe the first watcher question here was, you moved the contacts to another Mongo database, but then how did you get them back into the client? That piece seemed to be missing from the article. So
Yeah.
You said Ajax. So you wrote this article. You guys just published another article about moving to Backbone, right?
We did, yeah. So that was to solve a different set of problems. Yeah.
But is that also was that part of, you mentioned using Ajax to get the data over there. Are you using Backbone then to pull that over?
In our first implementation, we were not. We're just using jQuery Ajax call directly from Meteor. The hardest part about that implementation was login. So we had to pass the login token over to this new service that was spun up on a completely different subdomain with a completely different database. And that was the first step of us breaking down our monolithic Meteor app into a microservices architecture, with context being the first microservice.
Yeah, nice. And so, how long did that take you, do you think?
It was just a couple of days of work, I think, to figure it out, to diagnose the problem and spin up the microservice.
I see. Okay. And your background before this, what kind of language or framework were you using before?
So before it was Django, actually. So
okay. And do you feel like maybe it was easier to break apart the pieces of the app like this with Meteor, or do you think it was about the same as it would have been in Django?
It was probably the same amount of effort, I'd say, because most of the logic is actually in the application layer and not aided by framework at all. So I had to do a lot of it as close to the metal as possible, just using $sign Ajax directly as I would, and using any middleware framework, I would have to write that same front end code. And then middleware-wise, I spun up a node service just because that was quickest and I could get the benefit of using Express as opposed to trying to use Iron Router for RESTful endpoints, which can be a little bit difficult with authentication and all that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was from David Sikora. I hope I said that right.
And I should mention that in 1.0.4 Meteor, that issue was fixed. So we did test it, and the CPU spin was under a second.
Yeah. And so, it was a weird way to solve it, because they're just watching for your op log to get too big, and then once it gets too big, they just flush it, stop caring about it, do a quick pull and diff, and then get back to caring about the op log.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of ironic because they went back to their original solution, the pre-op log.
Yeah. Which, that's, if you don't enable op log, that's how everything works anyway, which in and of itself can be kind of a CPU drain, because you're basically running queries every 10 seconds to see if anything's changed. So. All right. The next question is from Patrick. Mencius Lewis. I don't know. I probably said that wrong. He wants to know how to make a site stable that has millions of users, but you don't have millions of users, right?
No, I wish. Hopefully, I can answer that question a year from now.
Yeah. I don't even think I could answer this question. I don't know. Like, I worked on Words with Friends for 2 months, but I'm
Yeah.
still not even sure. At the point I was there, they were at 1 million users, or millions, right? He said plural, so I don't know. I would invite this guy to maybe talk to Facebook about that.
Yeah, and I think the key to large scale is just being able to scale horizontally, right? Because even Facebook does that. They made a lot of early decisions to be able to silo all their users. I guess at the time they're doing it by school, so they could just scale horizontally outwards and take on millions of users and keep data siloed. Um, and that's effectively what we would do also, I think, as we start to scale up. We would just shard on the user because our users are very independent. They carry their own data, their own contacts, their own email drafts, all that.
Mm. So is that all? Do you keep all that in the user collection then, like as subdocuments, or?
We do. So we have 3 databases right now, all Mongo. We have our Meteor app database that stores all our users and our email drafts because we have to store those. We don't store emails once they're sent, though. We have our contacts database, which only has one collection, contacts. And then our third one is for email tracking, and it's an append-only Mongo collection, so super performant. And we have a layer on top of that built in Redis. So we use Redis PubSub to implement email tracking, the real-time component of it.
Mm.
When you send a tracked email, you see a Chrome notification.
Nice. All right. So we're getting a lot more questions here. Well, this one's a good segue. It's from Pablito. Do you think MongoDB is ready to work in large-scale applications? How would you handle the schema-less approach when your whole site structure changes and nested documents don't make sense anymore?
Yeah, okay, so it's kind of 2 questions in one. I think scaling wise, I probably can't answer that because in the world of Mongo, we are a tiny, tiny application. I mean, there's companies out there that easily have 20 billion documents in Mongo, so we probably have to ask them about that. As far as schemaless, or rather the lack of relational operations in the database, we are starting to run up against that a bit and just have to work around it with more application code to perform like pseudo joins. One area that we're running into that is templates inside of Mixmax. So you probably frequently send the same email out several times. If you work on a team, sometimes you all share the same email that you send out, especially if you're on a sales-like role. So we want to make shared templates, and that runs up against the limits of a schemaless database like Mongo, because we want to treat all that data in a relational manner and query it out in one shot.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. It's kind of odd, right? I think Meteor could make it better. If they did some kind of reactive join or something and put that out there. But I mean, there's a number of good packages to do that as well.
Yep.
So, yeah, we'll just keep rolling with. I'm gonna keep pulling out the MongoDB ones for now.
Sure.
Since we're on the topic. This one's from David Sikora again. When you ran into the issue with high writes on MongoDB, did you try to remove the pub sub that was looking at the collection and use a non-live query to grab the documents instead before moving to a separate database? I think you said you did try that, right?
We did, yes. That was our first solution, and we found that while it certainly did reduce the CPU burn, it took it down from like 8 seconds down to, I think, just a few. Meteor was still having to eat up the op log, only of course to find out that it wasn't interested in those queries. So
Yeah,
it helped a little bit, but wasn't the solution.
Yeah. I mean, I think the solution here is being able to tell the oplog the data you care about, but that's really not what the oplog's built for.
and Mongo, quite frankly, built for that. Yeah, so that would take a deeper integration in a database.
Yeah,
probably not using Mongo.
Yeah, so then he had follow-ons like how much of a difference did it make in CPU, which you kind of mentioned there, and then uh, I'm curious how well Meteor handles high load on the uplog when it is discarding the changes for a collection versus when it is trying to keep the merge box clients up to date on that collection. We
Yeah,
kind of
same answer for that.
yeah. All right. Yeah, so I'm going to generalize this one. Someone asked, is Rethink DB the next DB on Meteor? First, I'll just say I actually think it might be just because like Slava took a hack week and got it halfway there. So I think we might see something come out there from them. Maybe not official, but definitely from a developer there. But have you guys looked at any other databases or maybe thought about moving to some other kind of architecture besides Meteor? Or not Meteor, but Mongo?
We have not yet. That's probably our next area of exploration, especially since we might have to introduce a relational database for just to model our data a bit better. But yeah, I mean, my first take on it is to just use Postgres, but I think we can do a little bit more investigation with all the new options out there.
Yeah. I think Rethink DB certainly looks interesting. It looks like, I mean, what you would have wanted. I think had it been out, like it probably would have just been plugged in as the first database that Meteor supported. And I like Mongo's got a really bad rap for some reason. I, I guess it just had early problems, and maybe Rethink DB doesn't have that baggage because it hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of the holy grail for databases and Meteor is being able to have a better op log so you can have like almost an internal subscription. So you can scale horizontally that way, right?
Yeah.
Meteor instance can subscribe within the database to data that it cares about.
Right. Which is, I mean, that's the idea behind Rethink is that you can actually, like, it does pub sub itself. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
pretty sure. Oh, this guy. Oh, we're getting a number of questions from this guy now. Stephen Hocus? No, I'm just kidding. It's Stefan Hohaus. So let's see. What does your stack look like? Do you use Meteor Cluster? And wow, this is like a multi-part. Do you have Nginx or HA proxy in front of the app servers? Do you use Cloudflare or he said other services, but I'll say CDNs or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. So we're actually pretty plain stack. So we're hosted on Modulus, which I recommend. Great platform as a service. And so we use what they use. I guess they have a custom load balancer. So for all that, and then we just use the regular Modulus deploy command for our Meteor app. And then we're also hosting our bare bones Node and Express services on there. But it's all pretty straightforward, all load balanced through them. And then as far as CDN, we use it for our static assets like our JavaScript and CSS. So I just have a build script that handles that.
And where are you putting those at? Just on like CloudFront or Cloudflare? Or CloudFront, yeah. I would really love to see. Like, I don't know if I have the time to do it, but I'd love to see a package that just automatically inserts the CloudFront URL, and that would trigger it to like go grab the origin, like JS and CSS, and then you don't have to worry about a build script, right? Like it would just be automatic. So
Yeah, I had to do a lot of hackery to get that to work.
yeah, I think it's possible now though with the state of the client side kind of command tooling that you can integrate with Meteor. All right. Oh, this is a good one. So, how are you monitoring your server health and application performance on a daily basis? And I'll say, like, I was pretty impressed with your second article where you talked about switching to Backbone and like the amount of instrumentation you were plugging in and putting on Keen. Like, I think you should definitely talk about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as real-time monitoring, we use Webmon for just pinging the server to make sure the server is healthy and responding within 3 seconds. All our services expose a health route. So you can go to any of our services /health and they'll return a string if everything is good. So internally though, each service will check to make sure that emails aren't being delayed, that tracking is working properly. So it'll run through database queries and all that. We just use Modulus as out-of-the-box metrics to watch CPU performance. We use Kadira, of course, on our Meteor app. And then we also have Keen. So Keen logging has been great for us because I can do 90th percentile performance timing for a bunch of different flows in our app, sending an email, clicking around, all that. I think the most important and informative flow that I've been instrumenting is just page load time. And there's this really great HTML5 attribute that was introduced a few years ago, window.performance.timing, or rather a JavaScript API. And with that, you can get a really great breakdown of your site loading by loading segment. So a segment could be time first byte, how much time is spent server side, DNS connection, returning the base HTML page, time before DOM content load runtime, and then ultimately up until your window load event. And that's been valuable for us to fix our performance issues on our front end.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure New Relic implements that, and you can get like all these kinds of stats from them. I would love to see Kadira maybe automate this type of thing. But I love the article because you talked about using Keen to get all this information, and so do you. I mean, you just make a call somewhere in the back end that sends the data to Keen, or how exactly are you doing that?
It's all front end, and the code is actually in the article. But what I've done in the article is I put a little snippet in of how to just get your time to first byte when loading your website. And all that's done asynchronous. It doesn't slow down the loading. And it can all that timing can be gathered after the page is fully loaded because the browser stores that in that JavaScript variable.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess, I looked at this and I missed the part. I saw you like using the timing object, but I guess the Keen, you just set that up in the client and just give it like a key or something?
Yep. So the key is the first parameter. And then Keen has a bunch of JavaScript libraries to make creating dashboards really easy. So we have a full dashboard of all our timings.
All right. Awesome stuff. So we'll mark that one as done. So Jeff Ware said, you mentioned that users might get logged out under conditions of high load on the web servers.
Yep, so the key is the first.
Oops. Why is that?
So why users will get logged out?
Yeah, when the load gets high. Why is that happening?
So Meteor for login keeps the WebSocket connection, right? That's all done over the WebSocket connection, and we'll sync the user state so you can log someone out on the server and then it'll log out all the clients. Mm-hmm. So we found that when the CPU gets pinned at 100%, it would actually drop the WebSocket connection altogether. It just wouldn't respond, and the client would just assume it was logged out and show
So this is similar to like why you need sticky session support or something when you're using Modulus or Heroku or something like that. You want to make sure that they're always connecting back to that same WebSocket connection.
Yeah, because Meteor will think it's logging in if it loses the connection.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't realize. I mean, I guess it makes sense. When you hit 100%, you really can't maintain those connections anymore. So just one of those things you don't think about, I guess. Well, I'll ask this one, but I'm guessing the answer is no. William Huang asked, are you working with any kind of financial transactions in Meteor? If yes, could you describe the solution in MongoDB and Meteor?
We aren't. We're just using Stripe and their front-end library to complete.
And that's just in your app, right? Like when they come to Mixmax, they'll like choose a package or something like that.
Yeah. If you go to mixmax.com/pricing, it's all done front end. Stripe takes care of that.
Yeah. So I mean, I would definitely anyone that's looking to do anything like that, I would say look at Stripe, because they'll handle a lot of the PCI compliance for you. You just ship them a credit card, they give you a token back, and then you can, like, they'll handle charging every month and that kind of thing. It's
Mhm.
great. All right. So Brad Tate asked, how much memory were you assigning to your Compose.io MongoDB instances at the time you experienced the scaling issue? Did you say you were using Compose?
Oh, we were. Yeah, I probably didn't mention it, but we are using Compose.
Yeah. Okay.
So as far as memory for those, well, is the question about the Mongo layer or modulus?
I think it's about the Mongo layer. How much memory were you assigning? I don't. Can you adjust that
I
on
don't
Compose?
know, actually. I know you can on modulus. They offer like 300, 512, and a gig, and we're using 512 on modulus. But Compose, haven't seen an option for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe a better question is, like, how much data are you guys storing with Compose right now? Because I know they charge like $18 per gigabyte for the Elastic solution, which gives you the op log. So I'm kind of curious, with 8,000 users, what does that
Yeah,
look like?
we store a lot. Yeah, contacts are probably our biggest collection. Tens of millions of records. Messages, we actually don't store a lot of user data by design. So once you send an email through Mixmax, we don't store any trace of it, the body of the message. So we keep our data down, but I can say we're almost in the four-figure pricing tier with Compose.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yeah, we might need to move that in house and just as
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I gotta say, like, Crater, I think it's at like well, here I can just see, we're at like 2,300 users, and we're at 256 megs on disk. So
oh, okay.
um, our biggest collection is still under 100,000 though. It's notifications. There's like 32,000. My guess is, like, that could be flushed. I don't need to know that I notified you 2 years ago about a post.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't think data size is a huge problem, except for cost, perhaps.
Yep.
All right. So the next question is from Chris Kulia. I don't know. I butcher all these names. I'm horrible. Um, what has your experience with App Cache been? Do you guys use App Cache?
We don't actually. Haven't explored that much. And I assume by app cache that's HTML5 offline storage.
No, I think there's actually a Meteor package called App Cache.
Okay, that I've not explored. I was thinking it was application cache.
I'm pretty sure it basically keeps maybe it is the same. Yeah, it keeps your Meteor application in the browser's application cache. So it tries to keep all the static parts of your app in someone's cache, basically. But I don't know. Like, I feel like maybe this isn't a huge deal. Like, this is default browser behavior, in my opinion. As long as you're setting expires headers on things, the browser should hold on to those files for a while anyway.
Yeah, and you still have to download and execute all the JavaScript to be able to fetch things out of the app cache, and that alone is a lot of time.
Yeah. All right. So consider that one done. All right. So David asked again, you guys are in the envious position of growing in popularity very rapidly. I'd love to hear about any application architecture lessons you've learned, Meteor specific or otherwise, as your application grew in size and popularity.
Uh, you know, I wouldn't change much about what we did. And here's what we did. We chose the right framework at the time, which was Meteor. We grew our user base up into the thousands on Meteor, which was absolutely fine, and all in pursuit of finding product market fit. And that's what everyone should do for the first couple thousand users. And Meteor has been, I don't know where we'd be without it, really. It just allowed us to work incredibly fast and work with our designer quickly get features in quickly, learn quickly, right? Because in an early stage startup, about 75% of all the code that you write and all the features that you put in ultimately get thrown out, but it's a good thing. You're learning quickly. And Meteor is just excellent for that. And a lot of the recent learnings that we've had were all expected, all just expected growing pains of a startup that has to focus on a different set of problems. Our problems now are shifting from finding product market fit and making a few users happy to scaling, to getting that last 100 milliseconds of load time. And all startups go through that. So I think all the learnings were not necessarily unexpected, and I certainly have no regrets about our architecture choices.
Nice. Good answer. Here we go. This is a good one from William again. Do you try to have separate collections all the time as much as possible, or do you lean towards embedding data into the documents? I think we touched on it a little bit.
Good question. It's just so particular to how it's displayed in the UI and how it's queried out. Where possible, we try to lazily query information into the UI, of course. And for that, it's often easier just to have a separate collection. But it all depends on, the question you should ask yourself when designing your data model is, what will the user look at first when loading your site? Is it, if they see, for instance, comments for your blog article, when they load it immediately, maybe those comments should be part of the document for the blog post, so they can be queried out in one shot.
Yeah. Well, and there's interesting things you can do now too with template level subscriptions. And I wrote an article where, if you just use the post ID as your key for your comments, you could put those down in the bottom as a template level subscription. It doesn't have to be there for the page to render. You can just have like loading comments and it'll happen in the background, in good time. No big deal there. And so, maybe the other stuff, like you can put a weight on the post itself because you want that to be there before the page renders, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. All right. So I think we talked a little bit about this, but not so much scaling. So Lucas Seinfeld asked this. What are your thoughts on what Meteor or the Meteor development group could or should do to raise its popularity as an enterprise solution? I know that's one of their long-term goals. And then on build time scaling, do you use all of Meteor's built-in build processes, or did you have to switch to your own tools? Which I'm not sure. Just doing a Meteor deploy, is that maybe what he's talking about? I don't know.
I think so, yeah. Here, I'll answer those in reverse. So on the deploy side, we just use Modulus's demeteorizer command.
It's automatic, right? You just push and there you go.
Yeah, it just wraps it up in a Node app and will deploy on their service. And then I have a little bit of extra code that will actually sit there and watch the build to try to pick up all the static assets as they're put on disk temporarily, and upload those to a CDN. And then as far as enterprise goes, it's hard to say because in the world of enterprise, right, there's just so many different requirements depending on who the users are and how these applications are built and how many concurrent users, scaling, all that. I'd say for us in particular, I think more of an emphasis or maybe flexibility on modularizing the front end such that we can do server-side rendering for some parts of our app, maybe not others. I'd say, yeah, it's probably the most important for us, but it's a hard question to answer just because of all the different needs out there.
I think I would agree with you, though. Looking at like Sashko did an AMA on Crater the other day, and this was a big topic. Some people thought, well, MDG really needs to get involved and have their own router. But I think a lot of people are really, really interested in using Angular or React or something else on the front end, or even Backbone, right? Like that's where Meteor actually came from. If you look back to like 2004, they didn't even have, I think, Spark. And Blaze is there now, and it's okay. But at the same time, they've got a couple guys working on the front end stuff, whereas I think other teams like Angular or React, they have a much bigger team that's caring specifically about that one component. And maybe that's true of the whole framework, right? Like the more you can modularize and break off pieces and change them out with other pieces you need, the better off I think you're going to be for in the long run, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and different adapters for different databases, because any large enterprise will already have a database with a ton of user data they will want to put Meteor on top of, and they're not going to migrate it all to Mongo. So,
yeah, definitely. Good question. All right. So off the top of your head, what are your favorite packages?
well, Fast Render has been great for us. Kadira, obviously. Um, there's the little things like the time picker. It might be one of yours, Josh.
Oh, really? Are you? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. We did talk about that because I
yeah.
wrote it for Meeting Hero, and then they've left Meteor. So
Oh, did they? Oh,
yeah,
gosh. Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah.
funny.
And then what else do we use? Gosh, yeah, HTTP methods is kind of a nice one for building a few RESTful routes. We use that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll
Uh,
jump in here and say a few too. Like I think Mongol. Someone said reactive Oracle in the comments. No, that's terrible. Stop. Um, Mongol, I think has been pretty fun. I've been enjoying that one. It makes the development experience a little better. I don't have to like always be opening my console or whatever. Um, Published Composite's been, I guess, my go-to for doing those joins, like the reactive joins, and easily publishing data to the client. I still have worries about the scalability of that, like
mm,
because I think you're doing a find call and you're grabbing. I need to dig into the code, but I think they're like finding each object and then finding each child object off that object. And my guess is those queries are terribly inefficient, but I could be wrong. But it's still a good package. And yeah, what else? I guess Iron Router. I mean, everyone uses Iron Router.
oh, yeah, of course. Iron Router I just think of as a core package, but you're
Yeah.
right.
So maybe this is a good segue because you and I talked a little bit about fast render over email, and you were having trouble with fast render. Like there were some problems because you were trying to do server side rendering to fix this problem that you eventually moved to Backbone for. What was that problem? Do you remember?
So there's an open bug in Fast Render right now that on the client side, I believe, shows the exception server sent existing document for ID or something like that. And that's been plaguing us because it happens randomly and the client freezes when that happens. So there's been a little bit of activity on it, but no real solution. But it was definitely a blocker for us.
Yeah. And so do you feel like if maybe that problem wasn't there, you would have been able to keep going with the Mongo or with the Meteor front end? Or do you still feel like after all your learnings, like Backbone was probably the better choice?
Um, I think Backbone is a better choice because the way we're using Backbone, it wasn't Backbone per se, it was the fact that we were implementing server-side rendering first. So we were rendering out the entire document before even the script tag in the DOM. And then Backbone was the right framework choice for that because Backbone makes it super easy to attach Backbone views on existing DOM structure, which you can't really do in Meteor, right? Because Meteor brings all its templates with it client side and puts them in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd certainly, even with the fast render fix, it would have been too slow for our needs.
Yeah.
And I should point out that our needs are definitely unique because Mixmax is built inside of Gmail. So people often forget which parts are Mixmax and which parts are Gmail. So there's the expectation of absolutely fast performance and instant rendering. So if we were building out a real-time analytics dashboard or a completely different website, we wouldn't have any of these very strict performance requirements and would definitely still be using fast render and Meteor.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, So it wasn't a question per se, but someone in the comments said tests question mark. Are you guys writing any tests right now on any of your code?
Oh yeah, we have a pretty good unit test coverage, both back end and front end, and just using Jasmine for that.
Okay. So are you guys using like Velocity with Jasmine for the Meteor stuff?
We actually, it's been on my to-do list to get that running. Most of our tests are actually written in our non-Meteor code, our services that need the test a little bit more. So we're just using Node Jasmine over there.
Okay.
And then on the front end, yeah, just Jasmine.
Nice. All right. So William asked another question. When you start a subscription, do you start publishing more data than you need, or do you try to load as little as possible, but at the cost of having to have more code to lazy load more data later?
We always err on the side of as little data as possible and lazily load as much as we can.
Yeah.
Just for performance.
Yeah, there was an interesting discussion last night in the Meteor Club Slack chat room. We were talking about like pagination and like is it a needed thing with Meteor? Like is this maybe an old, like Sasha's getting ready to come out with an article about the whole thing on the Discover Meteor blog. But is this like an outdated idea that we're trying to perpetuate forward just because people are used to it? So I don't know, like what are your takes? Do you guys have to do any pagination for anything, or do you handle maybe loading more data in a different way?
We do. So we load email tracking information. We do use pagination, though not in the UI, purely just as a API. In the UI, the way it's implemented is a little bit weird, but if you go into your Gmail sent view, you can actually see the tracking information data from our Meteor app that we actually place on top of Gmail. So we designed that API in a way that it limits the amount of data that we query to only the data that we know we can display. And that's just been kind of our philosophy on performance first.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned that it's a Chrome extension that people install, and then it can be used in Gmail. Like, what do people do when they're on their phone, or they wanna have Mixmax capabilities in a mobile way? Like, do you guys have options for that?
We don't today, but it's certainly on our roadmap. One of the nice things about Mixmax, though, is that you as the sender can send a Mixmax message from the desktop that actually works in all email clients. So if you want to use Mixmax and schedule a meeting with someone, you can send to their email address. They don't need Mixmax installed. They can read that email on their phone and schedule the meeting. So there's this component of it that just works from the web itself that doesn't require any installation of a Chrome extension.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, I'm more a fan of Mailbox myself. That's what I tend to use. So, all right. Well, in that case, I don't know if this is necessarily relevant. Someone asked about Crosswalk on Android, but if you guys aren't building anything, like saying you did build a mobile client, would you guys look at Cordova, or would you try to go native, or have you put any thought into that?
We might, yeah. We're still thinking about UX for that, and particularly building for our user. And our user today mostly works from the desktop. Think about like a salesperson sending a email, visually rich email. Most of that's done on the desktop today. So we have to give a lot of thought into the UX first.
All right. Another good question. Do you guys usually upgrade like right away when Meteor comes out? Or do you wait a while and see how it settles out, or like if there's a feature you need, you might move right away? How do you guys do you have a policy around that, I guess?
We upgrade immediately. We trust Meteor.
Nice.
It hasn't broken us yet. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I tend to upgrade pretty fast. I think the one time that I wasn't able to upgrade fast was when 08 came out and they switched from Spark to Blaze. Like that was incredibly painful upgrade. At least as a package writer. It was
yeah.
not awesome.
I went through that with O.9, I think, was the big change to move off Atmosphere. And yeah.
Oh yeah, that one was not awesome either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I still miss like the ability to add the Git repo URL to Meteorite and just pull in a package that way.
Mhm.
And like you could pick branches and stuff. That was a great way to do testing on packages, I guess, as you
Yeah.
were developing them. But c'est la vie. I don't think we'll ever get that back. All right. Wow, this might be a first. We're like we've gone through 18 questions and we're out of them. So, that was a lot. What what do you think has been your biggest challenge with like creating Mixmax and building it and that kind of thing? Do you think it's like technical stuff, or do you think it's more like business stuff, like you mentioned earlier, product market fit and that kind of thing?
It's been business side, I think, mostly. Yeah, I mean, with Mixmax, it's been a journey. Even though it's been less than a year, since we started the company, it feels like a lot longer than that. We moved quickly as a team, and we started out with this vision of rich interactive content in a communication, and actually started building a chat client, almost a lot like Slack, that integrated elements of Google Docs, and you could send these visually rich messages back and forth, and that slowly kind of evolved into a Chrome extension on top of Gmail, as we found out that we could do some really cool things inside of email, and there's no other tool like that. And there's just a huge demand for eliminating back and forth emails, essentially what our goal is, and implementing workflows in the form of interactive widgets inside email. And just figuring out that product market fit and that investigation took most of our time. And then most of the technical decisions were just fallout from gaining more users or implementing more features. But as I mentioned before, I certainly don't regret our early choice to build on top of Meteor. I think it got our company bootstrapped extremely quickly, and everything that we're moving off Meteor today is really just out of pure necessity of scaling some particular part of our app, or getting that last 100 milliseconds of performance out of the front end that our app uniquely requires.
Yeah. Yeah, I often get like emails from people and they're like, "Well, I'm thinking about Meteor, but I'm worried it's not going to scale." And my answer always is like, "Trust me, if you're building an app and users are going to pay you money, chances are like scaling isn't your problem. Marketing and product market fit are going to be your biggest problems out of the gate, and you're going to be able to like." If you're doing a good job, someone's probably going to give you some money to grow your business, and then you can solve the scaling problems at that point. So,
yeah, premature optimization is the root of evil.
yes.
I mean, it's very true, right? And that's startup advice. Build for your customer. Don't prematurely optimize, and build things that don't scale, right? Facebook was PHP and MySQL for almost 5 years, I think. They definitely built something that didn't scale until they had to scale it, and then they scaled it. So, yeah. Focus on the business problems first.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask this, and William just brought it up again. So since you guys have some tests in place, are you guys doing continuous integration, and then maybe a follow on? Are you doing any kind of continuous deployment, at least a staging or something?
We are, yeah. So we have a staging environment right now that's hooked up directly to our master branch. So whenever we merge, we can immediately test. And we're using CodeShip for CI right now, continuous integration, and that's been good. And we have our unit tests hooked up, so we get a email when things break. Definitely recommend getting all that infrastructure in place, early on, so people have an incentive to write a lot of unit tests.
Yeah.
Write
Yeah.
features without worrying about breaking others.
Totally agree. So we kind of got a combo question here. I'm gonna get rid of the one because we talked a little bit about testing in general. So are you doing any kind of like behavior driven testing or BDD type stuff? Have you guys thought about that? Especially like since there's Chrome extensions involved, like firing up a browser and logging into Gmail, making sure it shows up and that kind of thing?
We are starting to explore that right now. My first take on it is to use something like maybe like Sauce Labs that abstracts a lot of that away, so we can just write Selenium scripts and run it on all their virtualized environments, Windows, Mac, all that. We don't have that in place today, but will very soon.
Nice. Yeah, and I would say like if anyone's thinking about that kind of stuff too, there's a new product out there. I don't think it's fully baked yet, but I think it's available to play with called Simian. I think it's at simian.io, written by Sam. And the idea is that him and I were actually talking a while ago about testing, and he was talking about doing some kind of like in-browser version of Cucumber that people could write. And I said, actually it makes a lot of sense, because I think a lot of people have staging servers and stuff. What if you could just point to the staging server and have your test run there? And so like he just, I don't know, like it just started spinning wheels for him and he started writing something. So, that's another option as well. And I think the goal for him is to be able to plug in things like Sauce Labs, and he's going to have adapters so you can plug in different kinds of browsers and get responses and that kind of thing.
Oh.
Good stuff. Yeah. So Max 7 jumped in the chat here, and he said he'd like to add in that Facebook had a few crisis moments with scaling, as did Twitter. It's a good issue to have, but really challenging in the face of the problems. I would totally agree. I mean, like you mentioned, PHP and MySQL are the old trusty standards, but there comes a point at which I think you hit problems, or those tools just don't work anymore. And I mean, you look at Google a long time ago, and you look at Google now, like they're using completely different tools to get to the amount of scale that they're at. So
yeah, and Google's interesting because if you look at kind of the broad web development spectrum of frameworks and trade-offs between really high-level frameworks that allow you to develop quickly but might be slow performance side, and what Google's doing. Google's writing pretty much straight C++ code, for their web frame, their middleware. So
yeah, well, and they've got like all these like pieces that are helping distribute it across all kinds of servers so that they can scale horizontally easily. So
yeah.
So William wanted to know, are you guys using any kind of UI framework right now, like Bootstrap for CSS or something else?
We aren't. I believe we're all custom CSS. My co-founder is a phenomenal designer and a front-end coder, so he does a lot of that by hand. We are using Sass though for compiling CSS.
All right. So then Max wanted to see if maybe you could expand a little bit on how many operations you were seeing when the oplog problem became unmanageable for you guys.
So off the top of my head, I can tell you that when we sync a contacts for a new user signing up, they have on average, I think, 8,000. So it was about 8,000 writes, generally in a second. Those happen pretty quickly. Beyond that, I'll probably have to follow up with you on that and go back through and look at some of the logs that we gathered then.
Nice. No, that's still a good answer though. On that note, how many servers are you guys running? Can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So in Modulus, we have 8 servos, they call them servos, dedicated to our Meteor app. And then all the other node services are just 1 or 2 servos.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. And do you find, like, are you trying to keep them around a certain like CPU usage level or memory usage level? Is that why you're running 8, or?
We are, yeah. We're trying to optimize for CPU. We still have oplog tailing on, of course, on the messages collection, which we'll probably reach the limits of. So it won't really scale horizontally. So adding, another 10 servos, I don't think will actually help CPU in this case. But we generally, yeah, we add servos until we find the CPU goes down, and then we've kind of found our point.
Yeah, nice. So I wonder if that math holds true. I haven't been in Kadira in forever for Crater, but I was doing something around 150 users peak. Is that? Yeah, that's still true. Yeah, looks like I'm doing about 163 on one DigitalOcean server, which is running about 460 megs, and the CPU seems to stay steady around 10%.
Oh, okay. Reported by Kadir.
Yeah, by Kadira. I should probably totally look at DigitalOcean as well.
Yeah, that's yeah, we're probably around that 10% or so.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. I mean, you're maybe a little ahead of the curve then with 8 servos. I think I'd have to be somewhere around 10 to equal that, but
Okay.
yeah, that seems about standard. I think the Classcraft guys, I want to say they said they were on like 5 boxes, but I think they're using AWS, so they probably have slightly bigger boxes.
Yeah, probably much bigger. I think servo is generally pretty small, I think.
Yeah.
In modules.
All right. I think that's all the questions we had. Maybe the last question would be, have you guys landed funding, and are you guys hiring at all?
Yes, absolutely. So we did land funding. It was posted in TechCrunch just a couple weeks ago, and we are absolutely hiring. You can go to mixmax.com/careers or mixmax.com/engineering to see all my engineering, all our engineering posts on the Mixmax engineering team. But please, send us an email. There's an email address on that page.
And just out of curiosity, is that I wanted careers. Are you guys looking to hire people like in San Francisco, or are remote people okay, or like what's
Yes, we're willing to do remote. Absolutely.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I think you'll probably get a lot of emails now.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's do one last check here. Looks like we don't have any more questions, so we'll call this one done. I want to say thanks for coming on, Brad. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for answering all these questions.
Yeah, and thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll be back next month. I have no idea who the guest will be or when it'll be, but we'll find something interesting to talk about.
Great. All right.